Preparing for a sanctions and name screening. OFAC, UN, EU lists fuzzy matching PEPs interview. You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 15 key questions you're likely to face. For each one, you'll see what the interviewer is testing, the core concepts you should cover, and a sample answer. Subscribe, like, and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. What is sanctions screening, and why is it critical for a financial institution? The interviewer wants to assess your understanding of sanctions compliance purpose, regulatory expectations, financial crime risk, and the practical role screening plays in preventing prohibited relationships and transactions. While answering, focus on identifying sanctioned parties, preventing prohibited dealings, protecting the firm from legal and reputational risk, and linking screening to customer onboarding, payments, and ongoing monitoring. Sanctions screening is the process of checking customers, counterparties, beneficiaries, vessels, entities, and transactions against sanctions lists. I see it as a frontline control to stop the firm from doing business with prohibited parties. It matters because breaches can lead to fines, asset freezes, criminal exposure, and reputational damage. Effective screening combines accurate data, reliable list feeds, calibrated matching rules, investigation procedures, and clear escalation when a potential true match is found. Question 2. How would you explain the difference between OFAC, UN, and EU sanctions lists? The interviewer is testing your understanding of major sanctions regimes, jurisdictional reach, list sources, and why global institutions must screen against multiple regulatory authorities simultaneously. Make sure to cover OFAC as US-focused, UN Security Council sanctions, EU restrictive measures, jurisdictional applicability, local implementation, and the need to follow the strictest applicable requirement. OFAC is the U.S. Sanctions Authority and is especially important because U.S. dollar transactions, U.S. persons, and U.S. nexus activity can trigger obligations. UN sanctions are issued by the Security Council and are implemented by member states. EU sanctions apply across EU member states and EU persons. In practice, I would not treat these lists in isolation. I would screen against all relevant regimes and apply the firm's policy based on jurisdiction, product, customer location, and transaction nexus. Question 3. What is fuzzy matching in name screening, and why is it used? This question evaluates your understanding of matching logic, data quality limitations, transliteration issues, and the balance between detecting true risks and managing excessive false positives. In your answer, talk about approximate name matching, spelling variations, aliases, phonetics, thresholds, risk scoring, false positives, and why exact matching alone is insufficient for sanctions compliance. Fuzzy matching identifies potential matches where names are similar but not identical. That is important because sanctioned names may appear with spelling differences, abbreviations, aliases, reordered words, or transliteration from non-Latin scripts. For example, Mohammed may also appear as Muhammad or Muhammad. I would use fuzzy logic with supporting identifiers like date of birth, nationality, address, passport, or entity registration number. The goal is not to match everything, but to catch meaningful similarity without overwhelming investigators. Question 4. How do you distinguish a false positive from a true sanctions match? The interviewer wants to assess your practical alert investigation skills, ability to compare identifiers, documentation discipline, and understanding of when an apparent name match becomes a reportable risk. Be sure to mention comparing name, date of birth, nationality, address, identifiers, aliases, entity ownership, list details, source documents, and documenting a clear rationale for closure or escalation. I would never clear an alert based only on a name difference or similarity. I compare all available identifiers, full name, aliases, date of birth, nationality, address, passport or ID number, entity registration data, and list narrative. If the customer is a John Smith in Canada, and the SDN is John Smith born in Iran with a different passport, that may be a false positive. If identifiers align or remain ambiguous, I escalate rather than force a closure. Question 5. Walk me through how you would investigate a sanctions screening alert. The interviewer is testing your ability to follow a structured alert disposition process, gather evidence, assess risk, escalate appropriately, and maintain a defensible audit trail. While answering, focus on reviewing alert details, comparing customer and list data, checking reliable sources, determining false positive or potential match, documenting evidence, and escalating unresolved cases. My process starts with understanding what triggered the alert: name, alias, address, country, or identifier. Then I compare customer data against the sanctions list record and collect supporting information from KYC files, public registries, passports, corporate documents, and transaction details. If clear differences exist, I document why it is a false positive. If key identifiers match or are missing, I treat it as a potential match, escalate to sanctions compliance, and avoid processing activity until guidance is received. Question 6. What is a PEP, and how is PEP screening different from sanctions screening? This question evaluates your understanding of politically exposed persons, enhanced due diligence, corruption risk, and the distinction between risk-based monitoring and legally prohibited dealings. Make sure to cover domestic, foreign, and international organization PEPs, family and close associates, enhanced due diligence, source of wealth, and the fact PEP status is not automatically prohibited. A PEP is someone who holds or has held a prominent public function, such as a senior politician, judge, military official, or state-owned enterprise executive. Their relatives and close associates can also create risk. The key distinction is that PEP status does not automatically mean we cannot onboard them. It triggers enhanced due diligence, source of wealth, source of funds, senior approval, and ongoing monitoring. Sanctions screening, by contrast, can result in legal blocking, rejection, or reporting obligations. Question 7. At what points in the customer lifecycle should name screening occur? The interviewer wants to assess your understanding of lifecycle controls, ongoing monitoring, trigger events, and why screening is not limited to initial onboarding. In your answer, talk about onboarding, periodic reviews, list updates, customer data changes, transaction screening, product expansion, ownership changes, and exits or offboarding where required. Screening should happen before onboarding, but it cannot stop there. I would screen at account opening, during periodic KYC reviews, when sanctions lists update, when customer information changes, and when ownership or control changes. For payments, beneficiaries and intermediaries may need real-time transaction screening. If a customer expands into a high-risk product or jurisdiction, that should also trigger rescreening. The principle is simple. Sanctions risk changes over time, so controls must be continuous. Question 8. What are the key components of an effective sanctions compliance program? The interviewer is testing your broader governance knowledge, including policy, systems, controls, training, testing, escalation, and senior management accountability in sanctions risk management. Be sure to mention risk assessment, written policies, screening technology, list management, alert procedures, escalation, reporting, training, quality assurance, independent testing, and management information. An effective program starts with a sanctions risk assessment, covering customers, products, geographies, and transaction channels. Then, the firm needs clear policies, up-to-date list feeds, calibrated screening systems, documented alert investigation procedures, and escalation paths. Staff should receive role-specific training, and quality assurance should test whether analysts apply standards consistently. Independent testing or audit should challenge the framework. Senior management also needs meaningful MI, such as alert volumes, true matches, aging, overrides, and system issues. Question 9. How do aliases, transliteration, and name order affect sanctions screening? This question evaluates your awareness of real-world data challenges, especially non-Latin names, cultural naming conventions, aliases, initials, and how these issues affect match quality. While answering, focus on alternate spellings, patronymics, reversed name order, shortened names, maiden names, non-English scripts, aliases on list records, and supporting identifiers beyond name alone. Names are messy in real screening. A sanctioned person may have aliases, different spellings, patronymics, or names transliterated from Arabic, Cyrillic, or Chinese scripts. Some cultures place family names first. Others use multiple middle names or initials. That means exact matching will miss risk, while overly broad matching creates noise. I would rely on alias coverage, phonetic logic, name parsing, and secondary identifiers. Good investigation means understanding that a name is a starting point, not the whole decision. Question 10. Can you explain OFAC's 50% rule and how it affects entity screening? The interviewer wants to assess your knowledge of ownership and control risks, indirect sanctions exposure, aggregation of sanctioned ownership, and limitations of list-based screening alone. Make sure to cover entities owned 50% or more by blocked persons, direct and indirect ownership, aggregation, beneficial ownership data, and why non-listed entities may still be blocked. OFAC's 50% rule means an entity is generally treated as blocked if one or more blocked persons own, directly or indirectly, 50% or more in aggregate. The entity may not appear by name on the SDN list, so simple list screening is not enough. I would examine beneficial ownership and ownership chains. For example, if two SDNs each own 25% of a company, the combined 50% can create blocking risk. Question 11. How would you reduce false positives without weakening sanctions controls? This question evaluates your ability to balance operational efficiency with regulatory effectiveness, using tuning, data enrichment, segmentation, and governance, rather than simply lowering match sensitivity. In your answer, talk about improving customer data quality, adding secondary identifiers, tuning thresholds by risk, suppressing proven recurring false positives carefully, and validating changes through testing. I would first improve data quality because poor KYC data drives unnecessary alerts. Then I would use secondary identifiers such as date of birth, country, address, registration number, and passport details to refine matching. Tuning should be risk-based. Higher sensitivity for high-risk jurisdictions or products. More precise logic for low-risk segments. I would be careful with suppression rules and only apply them with evidence, approval, expiry dates, and QA testing to prove true matches are not missed. Question 12. What information in a payment message is typically screened for sanctions risk? The interviewer is testing your understanding of transaction screening, payment message fields, counterparties, geographic indicators, and why sanctions risk may arise beyond the direct customer. Be sure to mention originator, beneficiary, banks, intermediaries, free text fields, addresses, vessel names, country references, goods descriptions, and real-time interdiction for payment processing. In payment screening, I would look beyond the account holder. Key fields include originator, beneficiary, ordering bank, beneficiary bank, intermediary banks, addresses, countries, and any free text remittance details. Certain messages may include vessel names, ports, goods descriptions, or invoice references. A payment can create sanctions risk through a counterparty, bank, location, or narrative reference. Because payments move quickly, controls need real-time interdiction, clear queues, and escalation rules before funds are released. Question 13. If a customer has the same name as an SDN, but different date of birth and nationality, what would you do? This question evaluates your judgment in a realistic alert scenario, including how you weigh conflicting identifiers, avoid assumptions, document decisions, and decide whether escalation is required. While answering, focus on comparing all identifiers, checking data reliability, verifying source documents, considering aliases and missing data, documenting rationale, and escalating if uncertainty remains. I would treat the same name as a trigger, not a conclusion. If the date of birth and nationality clearly differ, I would verify those details against reliable documents and compare other identifiers, such as address, passport, place of birth, and list narrative. If the differences are strong and documented, I would close it as a false positive with rationale. If customer data is incomplete, or the list record includes aliases or weak identifiers, I would escalate for sanctions review. Question 14. What is the difference between blocking, rejecting, and escalating a sanctions-related transaction? The interviewer wants to assess your understanding of sanctions response actions, especially how operational handling differs depending on the regulatory regime, transaction status, and match confidence. Make sure to cover blocking or freezing assets, rejecting prohibited transactions, internal escalation for potential matches, regulator reporting, and the need to follow jurisdiction-specific legal guidance. Escalation means the case needs sanctions compliance review before action is taken. Blocking usually means freezing property or funds because a blocked party has an interest, and the institution must not release them without authorization. Rejecting means refusing to process a prohibited transaction without necessarily holding the funds, depending on the rule and jurisdiction. I would not decide this casually at analyst level. The correct action depends on the list, nexus, asset interest, local law, and legal or compliance guidance. Question 15. How do you ensure sanctions list updates are handled properly and auditable? This question evaluates your knowledge of list management controls, change governance, rescreening requirements, system integrity, timeliness, and evidence needed for regulators or internal audit. Be sure to mention authorized data sources, update frequency, system ingestion controls, reconciliation, rescreening existing customers, exception handling, audit logs, QA checks, and documented evidence of completion. I would ensure list updates come from approved sources and are loaded into screening systems within the required time frame. After ingestion, controls should confirm completeness, file integrity, version number, and successful deployment. New list entries should trigger rescreening of existing customers and, where relevant, open transactions. Any failed loads or exceptions need escalation and tracking. From an audit perspective, I would retain timestamps, source files, reconciliations, user approvals, and evidence that alerts generated from the update were reviewed. If you are still with us, congratulations! You are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.